Hi guys, welcome back. We're about to finish all four perfect forms. We've already had present perfect continuous, now we're having past perfect, and we're going to have past perfect continuous in our next lesson. So, looks scary, but don't be scared. It's not that difficult. It's all about an action or circumstance happened once or many times before the action in the past. So we sometimes might say that past perfect is a present perfect, but in the past. But no, present perfect is more confused and complicated with its experience, result, recent event, in connection to the present. And past perfect, the most critical moment here is before. Something happened before another action in the past. That's all. So we use past perfect quite rarely in spoken language, in spoken English. We mostly use it in written English, in the books, and in historical accounts, right? So let's see what we have here. Past perfect, what is it? Past perfect, auxiliary verb, had, in the present perfect it's have, but here it's had in the past tense. Had plus past participle. What is past participle? The third form of the verb. She had worked there. Affirmative. Had she worked there? Question. She had not worked there. Simple. Negative. When the taxi arrived, I had already been all wet. Everything's happening in the past. When the taxi arrived, so I had already been wet before, right? Before, and then the taxi arrived. Okay? I had already been wet before, and then taxi arrived. When we came to the cinema, Mark said that he had seen that film before. He had had an experience to see this film before, right? Before that moment when they came to the cinema. He had seen that film before, okay, that moment when they came to the cinema. I didn't want to go to that show. Because I had been there many times. You're talking to someone, yesterday Sarah called me and invited me to that show, but I didn't want to go to that show because I had been there many times before in the past. Had you ever been to Egypt before your visit last year? Last year, it's happening in the past, so that's why it's had you ever been, past perfect. So if there wasn't last year, if it wasn't past tense, we could say, have you ever been to Egypt? Using present perfect. Have you ever been to Egypt? Meaning your experience, your present, up to now, right? And since this happened in the past, we use past perfect. Had you ever been to Egypt before your visit last year, right? In the past. I had always loved sweets before I realized that it was not good for me. I had always loved in the past, right? So if it were here, now at the present moment, you could say present perfect. You could use present perfect. I have always loved, meaning I still love. But here, it happened in the past, so that's why past perfect. I had always loved sweets before I realized, right? I had always loved sweets before that moment, right? And then I realized that it was bad for me in the past. I failed that test because I hadn't done it before. I needed more time. So, you're talking to someone, yesterday I failed that test because I hadn't done it before. I needed more time, right? I hadn't done it before in the past. So that's why I failed it. We had that microwave for 10 years before it fell and broke, right? So had is auxiliary verb, had, past perfect, and this had is the third form of the verb have. Have, had, third form of the verb have, meaning possession, to have something, okay? Possession. So we had that microwave for 10 years before it fell and broke. So we had that microwave, we had possessed it, we had owned that microwave before for 10 years before, okay? And then it fell and broke, okay? We had that microwave for 10 years before that tragic moment, and then it fell and broke, right? Before. when I looked at my reports, I realized that I had made a mistake. I had made a mistake. So I had made a mistake already, and then I looked, right? I looked at my reports. I had already made a mistake before that moment, and then I looked at my reports. So I specifically underline here to highlight the fact, guys, that we sometimes can modify and use interchangeably past perfect and past simple. In spoken and written English, sometimes can modify and use interchangeably past perfect and past simple. So here we could say, when I looked at my reports, I realized that I made a mistake. That would sound okay, with little or no difference. Or I started playing when I had finished my homework. I had finished my homework already, and then I started playing, right? In the past. So you could say here also, I started playing when I finished my homework. Okay, you can easily, okay, no problem, you can modify and use it interchangeably with past simple. I finished my homework, right? So, he was a strong man. He had never been sick in his life. He was a strong man. We're talking about a man that passed away many years ago, or some kind of a historical figure. So, he was a strong man before. He was a strong man, and he had never been sick in his life. He had never been sick, right? Before in his life, he had never been sick before his death, right? So, he had always been a tyrant. So, this is from history, guys, from historical documentary series. I love history very much. So, and this is about the last king of England from the house of Plantagenet, Richard II, who was deposed by his cousin Henry IV, the future king of England, from the house of Lancaster. So this Richard II, he was a tyrant, right? He was a bad king, and Haas of this documentary calls him a tyrant, saying he had always been a tyrant. He had always been a tyrant in his life before. Okay, he had always been a tyrant before his death, before he was deposed. Right? All right. Even after everything he had done, how could he be tortured in such a horrific way? This is also from history, continuing the historical theme. Today we're having kind of a mixed lesson with language and history, guys. So, and this is about an English king, Edward II, who was deposed and put into jail by his wife, Queen Isabella of France, and her lover, Mortimer. And eventually, afterwards, he was murdered in his prison cell by her order. So, he might have been a bad and responsible husband, and that's why she deposed him. So, and I'm sure that you have all seen, guys, the famous Oscar-winning film by Mel Gibson, The Braveheart. So, and Queen Isabella of France is played by Sophie Marceau in that film. And that young prince, her husband, is Edward II. Right? So, so the Haas of this documentary, he describes this moment as saying, even after everything he had done in his life before, right? Before his death. Even everything after he had done, all the bad and irresponsible things in his life, he had done before his death. Even after everything he had done before, okay? How could he be tortured in such a horrific way? So he was murdered, he was tortured in his prison cell, so that's why he described this moment. Alright then, so that's it. I hope it was interesting. Do not forget to subscribe. Stay safe. See you. Bye.